Well, and of course, we don't know exactly why the president was thrown into a rage this morning with his regular morning viewing of Morning Joe. Maybe it was because we brought up that in February, on February 22nd, he said that this pandemic was just one person coming in from China and it would magically disappear. Or in February, he said the same thing. Or in January, he was praising President Xi for being so transparent. Or in March, he said the same thing, said this would go away magically in April, which, of course, more Americans died in April.
It also could be that his staff, I mean, just at this point, everybody knows that he's having these meltdowns. He knows he's having them, and he's reading about them, and it's freaking him out that people are actually not just completely under his command and keeping everything tight as it pertains to what happens inside the Oval Office.
Well, I think also we showed some polls early this morning that he's always driven crazy by polls that, again, don't really line up with the fantasy world he's created. This is a CBS News general election matchup. Donald Trump losing by 6 points to Joe Biden. And then far more troubling, I'm sure, for the Trump campaign, this from the Dallas Morning News showing Joe Biden tied with Donald Trump in Texas. This follows a poll last week that showed Joe Biden tied with Donald Trump in Georgia. Donald Trump getting routed in some swing states, getting routed among seniors. And we also saw Casey Hunt a series of articles this weekend talking about Republicans finally, after 3.5 years, not socially distancing from Donald Trump, but politically distancing from Donald Trump, because you look at Martha McSally in Arizona, most consider her race lost. You look at Susan Collins in Maine, most consider her race lost. You look at the Colorado race, that looks like that one's lost. Mitch McConnell is actually going to be fighting for his political life, and he knows it, even if people around him suggest that he's going to be just fine. North Carolina, the same thing with Tom Tillis. He's in the race for his life. And these Republicans who have embraced Donald Trump for so long now find themselves in a position where they're having to politically distance. Talk about that, if you will, and how difficult is that going to be for a lot of these senators who have embraced him for 3.5 years?
Joe, it's hard to imagine a worst case scenario, obviously, for the country and for the tens of thousands of people who have died. But if you're a Republican trying to defend this president's handling of this, considering the facts at hand and what we know about how his administration handled, or how he handled this pandemic in its early stages, and you played all of the things this morning that he has said about this, about how it was going to go away. It was only, a handful of cases. This was not something people needed to worry about. All of a sudden, if you're trying to run for re-election in one of the worst environments, if not the worst environment in modern political history, depending where we are in November, if the economy is still lurching and, millions of people, hundreds of thousands of people are unemployed, this is a situation that is almost impossible to navigate, because there are still people, and we've seen some of them in these pictures in these protests, who are going to be with the president no matter what. But the broad swath of America that was disengaged before or turned off by the nastiness of politics is suddenly, they're at home on their couches. They were turning on those briefings. They're watching the news. They're looking at what this president is saying and thinking, really? And so suddenly those people are in play as voters. And if you're a Republican who, risks getting attacked and losing your base if you say something against this president, but you have to go home and face all of these newly engaged, really swing voters who are thinking, my grandfather, my, great aunt, my, daughter was affected by this. This is touching people's lives in a way that nothing else can. And, I think from a big picture standpoint as well, those of us in this business who, watch these things unfold and learn lessons from things that have happened before and apply them to the future, that's all well and good for the most part. But this is the kind of cataclysmic event that stands to reshape our politics completely. And I think it's important that we all remember that as we move forward into this election, because this really is going to be an enormous pivot point in history, and it's going to really dramatically affect the political fortunes and futures, especially of those who are tied to the party that's in power right now.
And again, as we've been saying for weeks, maybe even months, I don't remember exactly how long it's been, but senior citizens are breaking away from Donald Trump in Florida, breaking away from Donald Trump in Pennsylvania, and they're breaking away from Donald Trump in Florida and Pennsylvania, a 10-point lead for Joe Biden in Florida, and a 7-point lead in Pennsylvania. Seniors are breaking away from Donald Trump because he lies to them on television, and then they go to their doctor. Yeah. And their doctor, who they've known for 25 years, warns them not to follow that advice. It's like, again, you can lie about Robert Mueller, you can lie about Ukraine, and Americans, that doesn't affect Americans. They'll be like, I voted for him, he's shaking things up in Washington, I'm going to stick with him.
I've got to work about tomorrow.
I got to work. Kids. I got to worry about my kids. I got to worry about being able to pay my kids' way through school. Right. But this hits far closer to home, and that, that, Mika, is a problem, and that is why Republicans feel the need to politically distance some Republicans, certainly in those swing states that are breaking badly against Donald Trump right now. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.